Hi everyone, this is Shane, and today we will be learning on how to set up API. So first, let us talk about API that Humanity offers. So we offer Open API platform, which means that any third-party applications, softwares, database can integrate with Humanity as long as they are able to communicate on an Open API platform. Any API adapters that our clients use, they would be able to utilize it to maneuver their account. They would be able to set it up, execute commands without even accessing the actual UI, our interface over here, the software itself. So things that we have to keep in mind before we set up an API is that we are going to use an API adapter on our side, which is Postman. Now you can easily download Postman by going online. You would have to download Postman desktop application. Depending on your Windows, you may download a 32-bit or a 64-bit operating system. And once you do it, sign up. It's free of charge, and you may utilize this pre-set up API adapter. The interface for the desktop app would look something like this. Now, once we have the API adapter downloaded, we have signed up on it, and the interface is up and running, we move on to the next things. Now, the things we would have to take care of it is look at the API documentation, which is already over here, which our development team has already created for us, and it can be utilized by our clients. It is ready to use. All our API calls, each click that you make on Humanity has a separate API call for it. So any operations that you're doing on Humanity, either that would be scheduling, leaves, time clock, HR management, anything that you're doing will have a separate API call for it. Reporting, payroll, name it, and you have it over here. Now we have our API documentation here already, and it has pre-made parameters in it. So all API calls along with the syntax, the data specifications will be listed on this page. You may access this page by going to the Settings tab, then go to Data API, and click on API documentation, and it is going to bring you to this page. Now please bear in mind we have two API versions, API v1, which is still active. We are using it, and there are some different calls over here. So any clients who have API adapters which are already preset on it, they may prefer to use API v1, but anyone who's doing advanced API execution may want to switch over to API v2, which you can simply do it by clicking over here. The drop-down menu is going to appear, and you go to API v2. All our documentation will be listed on this page, how you can get started, how you can generate an API key, all your steps and instructions will be over here. Now, next thing that you would have to look into is the API syntax, the endpoints, URLs, and along with that, the data points that you would have to copy and paste while executing it. Now, the endpoint, syntax, URL, and parameter will be listed within each call that you execute and select. So, for example, if you're going to add an employee. Now, adding an employee is pretty simple when you go to the regular user interface, which is on our application. But when you're going to do it on API, that may require some precision, that may require different parameters in which you'd have to fall. So, just an example, if I click on this call, which is post employee, it is going to give me the syntax for my endpoint, which lets me know that it is going to be the https://www.humanity.com/API, because it is being executed through the API, the version of the API, which is v2, and what I'm going to do is for the employees. Now, if you look a little further below, it's going to give you the syntax or of the endpoint. Now, this syntax has already the things listed in here. It already has a call in it. It already has the token platform here, which you're going to generate from our settings page, and you're going to replace it in this URL. So that means you're going to append the token into this executable syntax. Now, if you switch the tabs over here, it has body parameters. Now, this goes into your API adapter in order to execute that API query. Now, this is going to have the syntax. The parameters will already be listed. All you'd have to do is just simply replace the data. If you scroll down, and you would be able to see our specification units in which the data has to be entered. So the name needs to be entered in string format, first name, last name, EID, status. All the statuses are represented by numbers. So each status you select, it will execute the API call accordingly. Which group do you want to add them, which means the permission levels, their email address, nickname, birthday, birth month, cell phone number, wages, anything you want, you may enter, and the script can go on and on and on, and you would have to only enter these fields over here. Now, this over here is just an expanded format of the actual API call that takes place. So, you don't need to worry about it much, but the only thing that you'd have to make sure is your parameters that you enter over here are actually correct. Without that, the API call would fail. Now, another thing to note here is the person who is going to set up the API needs to be an administrator or a manager on Humanity. So they do not have any restrictions on API. And also on the API platform the client is using or you're using, you would have to be the administrator on it or the person with the most privileged permission levels, just because these both things go parallel. So on one side, it has to be the same person, and on the other side, it has to be the same person as well. So consider that to be two separate entities who are going to run these from both ends. Now, the API adapter that we're going to use is Postman, that you have already downloaded, you've signed up, and this API adapter is already set. It just needs a few tweaks which are required for you to execute your API calls. Just because you might have to run some inquiries, you would have to extract data, you would have to fetch data in a way that the prerequisites would not support. So some tweaks would be required. Now, moving forward, let us switch back to our API page over here, and let us have a look on what are endpoints, what are the methods, what are the API parameters that we're going to use. And based on that, we would be able to execute everything on our API adapter. So let's get started. First things first, there are 4 different methods that Humanity is going to use. It would be the get method. If you look at these API calls and these endpoints, each endpoint, each call has these colorful rectangular boxes in them, and there are methods written in each of these calls. So the first one that we could see is get method. The get method is something that you would use to fetch data, to extract data from an endpoint. The next one that we would see is post. This is used to add the data into the platform. So using API, you would be able to add data into Humanity. Then we have the put method. This put method is used to edit the existing data that is already there in Humanity. And lastly, we have delete method. As said by the name, this is used to delete, remove, or unassign data from an entity or an element in Humanity. Now, please note, while running these API methods, there are 2 separate sections on these modes where this would work. So if you're using post or delete function, the method, you are going to use form data, which is going to be in the body of this API call. And please make sure that you do not use any other parameters apart from form data. Versus on the other side, if you're running the edit methods, you're running API calls, on the other hand, you might have to use another method that we would explore in the upcoming part of the video. Now, please bear in mind, API does not recognize anything that you have over here in Humanity. No colors, no alphabets, no names, nothing is going to be recognized by the API. All API understands is the ID of this entity over here. Now, this ID, this entity has a unique ID. Each click you make on Humanity has a unique ID with it. So, how would you extract this ID? You would only go into your browser on the main user interface, and the ID that you would extract is by simply right-clicking on that specific element, and on this right-click menu you would see Inspect. As soon as you click it, it's going to open up a separate window for you, or within the same window it's going to append and open the script for you. Now all the elements will be listed over here. Within this inspector, you would be able to see the IDs for each and everything that's available on your Humanity screen when you're looking at it. So if I show you over here, these are the names of the employees that are listed on my shift planning page within the week view, and along with that, these 3 shifts with some filters over here, autofill a button, publish button, these different views, everything is here. So if I go back onto the elements page, and if we start comparing what data we have on the user interface and within these scripts, you would be able to see the names of these employees, you would be able to see the names of these locations, positions, everything will be listed over here. Now, what we were looking was for the shift ID of David Austin or David Laughter. All we did was simply right click, then we selected inspect element, and this window appeared for us. And within this window, we would be able to see the ID. How do you find the ID? The ID will be represented by lowercase I, D, equality sign with inverted commas and a few numbers. So let's have a look and find the ID. It will be highlighted because that is going to expand the data for you. So you can even minimize it to fit into the screen. If you hover over these scripts, it's going to highlight everything for you, so you would know that which part you are inspecting for now. So if I expand it over here, and we're looking for the shift ID for Austin Davis, this is the shift for Austin Davis, and the ID for this shift is listed over here, which is 589898311. So whenever we're running the API call, all we would need is this ID to be added into the appended syntax, the endpoint, and the API query can run on its own and execute the operation, the method that we're using. Now, let's go back onto our API page and continue ahead from there.